In this podcast, we chat about the win against Hull, the draw against Bristol City, look ahead to Blackpool, and answer your podcast questions. This is the Boro Breakdown podcast, and this is our Boro Matchday Chatter in a pod.
Wants support. Curtis Fleming is there on the edge of the area. Fleming for Craig Hignett. Hit it, Higgy. Higgy hits the treble!
Avenelli coming alive again. Janino wants the ball played to him. Avenelli spots out Emerson!
Hello and welcome to the Boro Breakdown podcast with Johnny, Dana and Tom. We are the Boro podcast that gives you all of your Boro Matchday Chatter in a podcast. And a 3-1 win against Hull, a 1-1 draw against Bristol City give Boro 4 points from the week and move us up to 20th position in the championship table. Guys, since we scored 4 goals, got 4 points, I want to hear 4 words. So Dana, how are you feeling about Boro this week in 4 words?
Appreciative of the progress, I'm going to say. I know it's been just 3 games. We've had 1 of each result, but I think you can see within those matches that we are getting to somewhere at least. And I think we're putting the foundations in place, and you can see what Carrick's trying to do, trying to play out from the back a little bit, encouraging the quick receive and release in midfield. The build-up patterns are good. The shape, we're narrowing in midfield. So there's parts of the team that you can see things are starting to really progress and gel there. So yeah, appreciative of the progress. And if I could put it in brackets, I'd say so far.
Okay. I'll let you off for that. I'll let you have your 6 words then, if you put in brackets in. Tom, how are you feeling in 4 words? I mean, are you going to describe last night? Because you were out till late, but now...
Yeah, I mean, I was in flares until like 2 a.m, so I'm glad it's 4 words today for my hungover self. It's a lot easier. I'm just going to say reasons to be positive. Obviously, not the result we wanted yesterday, but we absolutely dominated based on the stats. And, I can't remember many chances other than the one they scored that Bristol City actually, threatened us with. So that
I bet really you can't positive. Remember.
I can't remember much, to be honest, but remember from the game. But we looked. It was a very positive display from us, and then the win against Hull midweek was exactly what we needed. A little bit gutted that my 3-0 prediction from last week didn't come off for Hull, and I'm even more gutted because I said I was going to put money on it. I had something set up for Boro to get over 2.5 goals at the start of the match, and then didn't do it, and then we went and did it. So yeah, I could have been up in a little bit of money there as well if I'd followed my own prediction, but wasn't to be.
A lot of people questioned that prediction as well, Tom. A lot of people in the Telegram chat were saying I spat my drink out when you said that, and it was laughing now, eh? It was laughing now. Ball prediction, Tom coming up trumps. That's what I love to see.
Actually, it's not me laughing now. I don't feel like laughing.
You just turn your mic off, and if you want to be sick, Tom, you be sick, okay? That's absolutely fine by me. I think for my 4 words would be I love progress, me. I think we've done all right the last few games, and you can definitely see the style that Carrick's trying to implement across this team. And I likened it to a Red Bull side in the last podcast, and I can definitely see the principles of a Red Bull team in this new Middlesbrough side, which is quite interesting. Not fully Red Bull type football, but there's principles in terms of press and the way we're setting up. I can see like similarities in that, but really good week for us, and hopefully we can build on from there until the World Cup and go from there. But let's chat about Hull then first, because a goal from Chuba, Akpom and 2 own goals, but you can give it to Lenihan and Giles, gave Boro the 3 points and give Michael Carrick his first win in charge. But before we go to the assessment of the game, I kind of want to go to Shithouse Island, because there was a big moment by a certain individual in the game. Yusuf Jama, you are in Shithouse Island.
Let me take you to a place where membership's a smiling face, brushing shoulders with the stars, where strangers take you by the hand and welcome you to Wonderland from beneath the Panama. Shithouse Island drinks are free, burning sunshine, there's enough for everyone. All that's missing is the sea. But don't worry, you're a shithouse.
Iconic podcast vision. Lovely stuff. Let's get Yusuf in Shithouse Island. Let's get the image up there. And if you don't mind, there we go. The 3-1 signed. It was hand over his ears. It was shithousery in its finest. So, Yusuf, congratulations. You are in Shithouse Island. And we do have merch for Shithouse Island as well on T-Side. And we'll put that link in the description below. In your podcast provider and on YouTube, because it is really great content and merch. But let's talk about Hull then, Tom, because a really big win for Boro, a big win for Michael Carrick, and a big performance as well for us. But how would you assess the game against Hull?
I thought it was a good performance. I thought the first 20 minutes, it did look a bit cagey. It seemed like neither team really wanted to concede. And, I think both teams in that first 20 minutes, they were just trying to kind of feel each other out and get that goal that would obviously kick off progress. But I think as soon as we scored, I thought we'd get more. I thought there was more goals in that game. And from around that point on, from around 20 minutes on, I would say we just looked in control. Hull never looked threatening at all. And like I say, good performance, and I think it's given reasons to be confident in this system, and reinstate confidence in this team.
Yeah, it was absolutely, and we just want to go on to like the shape side of things, Dana, as well, because in the last podcast we spoke about Boro's shape, the narrowness of it, and how maybe we want to push Hull out wide because a lot of their creativity does come from those narrow through balls into feet and also trying to get in behind. But you did mention last week about that big switch around Boro's narrow shape and out of possession as well. We did see it against Hull. So are you kind of happy with like that type of setup, or with us being prone to that long ball?
Yeah, I think that's always going to be a bit of a risk in the way that we set up, but I can see what Boro are trying to do there. We're trying to compact the middle of the pitch to basically nullify the influence from key players, like we saw with Ben Whiteman at Preston, putting Akpom on him, but also the wing backs and specifically Jones probably coming a little bit more narrow. You're always going to have that drawback of having gaps opening up in behind, but I think Boro set up in a way where we can get over to that side, so we're not just stuck in the middle of the pitch. We can shift over to whatever position the opposition have picked up in those dangerous areas. But I think it's a good shape for Boro to be able to basically have that really compact shape between the lines and to stop that threat from the middle, like I said. And I think it was McGree actually that mentioned it yesterday, that it does nullify that threat in central areas of the pitch, and maybe against other teams that have that emphasis on wing play, it could cause us more problems than not. But for now, against these teams that maybe aren't so effective from wide areas, that maybe don't quicker the tempo efficiently enough, I think it's fine. And there are certain risks of the way that Boro is set up, and we'll talk about another one of them later, but I think it's a high reward, I would say.
Okay, then, and we'll come to Boro's shape a little bit later on. But Tom, you're a Darrell Lennon fan when he signs, and it took him a bit of time to get in the swing of things. But do you think that was his best performance in a Boro shirt in midweek?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm not so much of a Darrell Lennon fan anymore because he didn't score yesterday and let me down for 95 quid. But no, I think the game against Hull was fantastic, and something that I think they mentioned on BBC Tees, maybe. Yeah, I think it was, but they didn't show it on Red Button, was the huddle. He was kind of like arranging things, like, leading the team after we'd scored the goals, trying to probably keep everyone focused and stuff like that. Wilder said when we signed him, he was a natural leader, and that was one of the things we were trying to address when we signed him. I think he's really showing that now. But yeah, defensively solid through the entire game, and obviously his header was the one that led to quite a scrappy goal. But it all counts.
I really want to hear him say Aardvark. Just a random point here. I really want to hear Darrell Lenihan say Aardvark, because I heard Robert Sheehan say it, right? Robert Sheehan, Umbrella Academy, Shameless. I thought it was the best thing that I've ever heard, apart from Zack Steffen saying up the Boro. But I really want to hear Darrell Lenihan say aardvark.
Well, look, Dana, this podcast can do special things. You know, if we say we want a Kieran Scott tie, we get a Kieran Scott tie. Thank you very much, Neil Madison and Paul Jews, for that for Dana. But if you want to hear Darrell Lenihan say that, Dana, we can make that happen. So, Darrell, I know you're listening. Can you please send that voice note to Dana ASAP, please? Speaking of Darrell Lenihan on that left-hand side, Dana, because the left-hand side has got a lot of criticism in lately, and especially in the post match as well. I think 42% of Hull's attacks did come from that left from their right, so Boro's left. We did say about Ryan Giles when he came to the club, defensively it could potentially be an issue. He is such an attacking fullback. Then that's maybe why we might see some negativity or lack of defensive ability from that. But do you understand the criticism at all? Because, you know, Boro do look fairly good for the majority of the time. It's just a potential weakness, I guess.
I understand it, but I don't necessarily agree with it, because if you look at the dynamic between Jones and Smith on that right-hand side, it's completely different to what we see on the left, because in terms of average positions, if you look at McGree's, he's very centralised. He's picking up those pockets. Carrick spoke and has spoken quite a lot about exploiting the key spaces of a football match. And McGree does that. He floats in. He's basically an 8/10 hybrid, which is what I spoke about on another podcast episode. And he is picking up those half spaces, which I think are really fruitful areas for Boro. We saw it yesterday. They were those runs, those underlapping runs are brilliant for us, and we need to utilize that more often. But effectively, Ryan Giles is being pushed up the pitch and he's playing as a wing back in a 4-4-2, and I think that's a good plot from Carrick to basically play to Ryan Giles' strengths, because it wasn't that long ago that we saw Ryan Giles be criticised a little bit for being played too deep, and he's not a fullback. He's somebody that needs to be in those advanced areas of the pitch. Of course, going back and behind Giles, you are going to get caught out a little bit. But again, tapping into the narrative of that high risk, high reward, I understand why Boro are doing it. I understand that dynamic between Giles and McGree is far different than the dynamic between Smith and Jones, who are basically playing as out and out fullbacks and wingers. You know, you'll see them two helping each other out in attack and in defence. But then when Giles comes back and we get caught on the counter, McGree's in a central position. He's in, you know, that sort of floating hole position. He doesn't have a set role. And, the touch map against Bristol City, you'll see Jones very, very tight to the line. He's playing as a winger. And then Riley McGree is playing in, as I said, those areas where he's a little bit more influenced in the central part of the pitch. So I don't mind this. I actually really like it, because you can see what Boro are trying to do. You can see that they're trying to be a little bit less predictable on that left-hand side, and they're trying to offer something a little bit different. They're getting Giles into the areas that we want him to be in. And unfortunately, that does mean that we're going to concede a few counterattacks. But against, I think it was Preston and against Hull, McGree is that first presser. He's the one that's constantly looking to go, looking to press. And then you see Giles behind him. He's set to go as well. So in terms of counterattacking, that could be a very fruitful partnership. And I do think there's something quite promising being built up between them two. It was our most frequent passing combination in the first game against Preston. I'd love to see it. I haven't had a look at the passing network against Hull and against Bristol City yet, but I mean, I think it would probably be somewhere similar. So it is high risk, but we're trying not to be so predictable. We're trying to maybe balance it out a little bit more, and I can appreciate that. Again, the top of the show saying that you can see what Boro are trying to do. I think that's one of the signs of progress, that we're trying to get our players into the areas that they can influence the most.
Yeah. And I tell you what, on the average positions, it is a lovely, lovely shape that we've got there. And what we're trying to compact in that midfield, and I'll come on to it a little bit later on. We'll break down a Blackpool, but what Boro are trying to do is absolutely spot on there. And what McGree's doing really well there is if he has that more compact shape, more central position, it does free up Giles on that left-hand side, and like you were saying there, to get the balls into the box for him. And look, it's part and parcel of the formations you're playing. I think 4-4-2 or 4-2-3, what we're doing, it does give you a lot of tactical flexibility, but it does leave you prone to certain counterattacks, or 4-3-3 if sometimes they're trying to use the extra man in midfield. And I think what Boro are trying to do there is just compact the shape when we're trying to press. And when we were saying on the last podcast, like the pro and negative of that 4-4-2 or the 4-2-2-2 or 4-2-3-1, because it is so flexible. Our press in those moments on the wing side of things, we are trying to compact teams into making that mistake, and I think that's where Boro's biggest chances will start to come from now, from opposition mistakes in those pressing areas. And like you were saying at the start of the show, that long ball over the top is the counter to it, because you are pressing a lot of people in a certain area, but then like you are caught sometimes. But you've got, since the press has to be so quick and so efficient, and that's how you tend to create the chance. But in terms of what you were saying there on the shape and what Giles and the left-hand side, yes, it might be a problem right now, but there is so many more positives which counteract that negative, and no formation is perfect, is it really? Let's be honest. I mean, like 3-5-2 that Boro played was really good for possession side of things, but we were prone in wing search situations and also 2v1s, so part and parcel, isn't it? But in terms of a player that's moved into a slight different position, in Chuba Akpom, he's playing as more of like a 10 centre forward, but he's been absolutely flourishing. Tom, how good was he against Hull? Because another goal for him as well, and he just seems to be enjoying his football at the moment.
Very good, I would say. I think it was kind of summed up perfectly, probably in the last couple of minutes where he did that. Was it the last couple of minutes, or no? It was for the third goal where he started off the move with that outside foot pass to Giles on the left hand side. I was like, I've not seen Akpom do that before, but absolutely perfect. He was absolutely brilliant against Hull. I can't say kind of enough kind of positives about him for that performance. He does, like you say, seem like he's really enjoying his football at the moment. He obviously popped up with another goal yesterday, and I think this is such a change to the Akpom that we saw when he first came in.
He basically created his first goal as well. As much as the second goal was fantastic, and I mean, he held off Jacob Greaves, didn't he? I think Jacob Greaves went in for that tackle, and then he evaded him, and that lovely outside of the foot pass. But also the first one, he's down that left hand side, and he manages to wiggle his way beyond, both with physicality and great technical skill, beyond about 3 Hull players, I think it was, and it was the cross into the box, and eventually, obviously, that leads to Tommy Smith's cross, and then Chuba Akpom popping up where you would want your striker to pop up. So it was a nigh on perfect performance from him against Hull.
Yeah, and obviously he's got 7 goals this season now, 5 in the last 8. Obviously 8 games since Chris Wilder left, and 5 goals, an absolute redemption arc on Chuba. But what's your thoughts on the Chuba redemption arc, Dana? Because I mean, under a couple of regimes, Warnock, a little bit of Wilder as well, out in the cold so much, and he's just for him to come back and put in the form and performances he's doing right now. It's really good to see, isn't it?
It is, and I remember saying in pre-season on the Telegram chat that I wonder if Chris Wilder will use Chuba Akpom. Obviously, Wilder was in charge at that point, of course, because I looked at some of his goals for PAOK, and he was getting into those really good positions on the near post, the far post. You know, that knack that some strikers have of just being in the right areas. I saw that for some of his highlights at PAOK, and of course their highlights. But I thought we could see something from him here. I said I don't think he's going to chip in. Well, I thought he was going to chip in with a few goals. He's probably exceeded my expectations of him, despite me probably predicting that he could play a part this season. But he's been absolutely fantastic. And I said it on Tees, I've said it on this podcast, I'm so happy for him, because I think a certain manager will probably be revising what he said on Chuba Akpom, and probably going back to the very first quote that we heard from Mr. Neil Warnock, that he was his number 1 target or whatever. Because look at him now, he's absolutely brilliant in terms of physically taking that ball in, turning, the technicality, the outside of the foot pass is just really good at the moment. And in terms of goals per 90, he's actually the top rank in the championship. He's averaging a goal every 115 minutes. I think it's 7 goals from 12 shots on target he has, which probably isn't sustainable. This is me probably deflating the balloon there, but as Boro fans, you've got to take that, haven't you? And I don't even care if it's not sustainable. I'm enjoying it for what it is in this moment, and he's been absolutely fantastic.
I bet you're fun at parties, Dana. You know what I mean? Just absolute negativity on that. You know, God, you never
It's the
know. It
life
might
of
be
a Boro
better.
fan, Johnny. It's the life of a Boro fan.
I know. Tom, how do you think he's been able to turn this form around then?
Well, I think he's always had the potential to do it. I mean, from my point of view, you don't get into Arsenal's academy and come through that academy if there's nothing about you football wise. And it was only last week or the week before where I think it was it was an article from The Independent in 2013 where it was saying what the World Cup squad for this year would look like, and it's Daniel Sturridge and Chuba Akpom up front. So like he's always been rated by some people as his career kind of fell off a little bit. I do wonder how much of an impact having fans in the stadium again is doing for him though, because obviously he signed under Warnock and had that COVID season where there was no one there. Some of my memories of him from that season, like missing open goals from a few yards out, and trying chip shots when shots, not chops, and putting them over the bar. And it's his first like real season playing in front of fans for Boro now, I believe. I think all those COVID seasons and blended into one, but I think it is. And he's the type of form that he's showing. I think that loan move last year has probably done him a world of good in terms of getting regular play time, getting his confidence back, and then just seeing him this season. It's not even just like goals that he's contributing; it's the physicality, that side of it, and you can just tell he's such a confident player at the moment. Going back to that outside foot pass that he did against Hull, an unconfident player wouldn't be doing that, but he absolutely nailed it. And as Dana said, it's really good to see for him.
Yeah, it is, and it just shows like how important confidence is in football, and it is probably arguably one of the most important things to have, because if you're confident, you can pretty much do anything. And with Chuba, he's went from having a chip shop called Chip off the old Chuba, and he's just now scoring goals. So, Tom, I will. I had to. It was there. It was an open goal. It was open goal, and I took it. But speaking of open goals, speaking of open goals and not taking the chances, we'll talk about Bristol City then, because Boro had 23 shots and 9 on target on Saturday with 72% possession. It was the first game for Michael Carrick as well at the Riverside, but a 1-1 draw. Probably should have won, Dana, but we didn't. But how would you assess the game against Bristol City?
I was a bit frustrated with the outcome, because I thought our performance in parts, and in quite a few parts actually, was really good. And I thought it was a winnable game. Nigel Pearson set up that Bristol City side to be very, very attacking. I was just listening to Three Peeps in a Pod. Obviously, we had Patch on the opposition show, and they couldn't get their head around that formation and the personnel behind it. Yeah, not really the formation, but the personnel behind it, Semenyo and Vyman as wing backs. As a non-Bristol City fan, that did raise my eyebrows as well. But I thought when we moved it quickly, we looked really dangerous and we started incredibly well. I mentioned earlier, those underlapping runs are so fruitful for us. There's a move that I want to describe 44 minutes in at the game that I really, really liked. Ended up in Force's shot hitting the bar. Post. But it was a cross and it comes back out. Howson brings it down, and then him and Hackney play it between one another before Howson, he quickens the tempo a little bit, plays it to Jones on the right-hand side. And as Jones has the ball, in the meantime, there are 2 runs being made. One on the outside of him from Smith and the other on the inside from Hackney. And this is where the half space comes into play. So Jones feeds it between 2 Bristol City players, to Hackney in that half space. And Hackney, lovely piece of play, lets the ball run across him. He cuts it back. And you have to say it's literally on the money, right on the money for Force, who at that point is about a yard or 2 back from the penalty spot. He hits that shot, and unfortunately for us, Tim Closer blocks it. But those half spaces are dangerous for Boro. It's where we saw under Chris Wilder, we had a really big impact. It's where I really want to see Jones, those cutbacks on the byline in the half space. We need to utilise that more. And when we did in that first half, I thought we were really good. Their goal came against the run of play. It was poor. And I think because of Bristol City after that, they reverted to a bit of a low block, and then Boro started to play it a little bit safe because of that. But yeah, it was a good game. You know, the second half we got that early goal, and I really hoped that we would push on from there. But Max O'Leary had one hell of a game. He made the most saves in the Championship this game week with 8. But yeah, I think in terms of XG, 1.79 for Boro and 1.08 for Bristol City. So you're looking at pretty much almost a 2-1 game there. But unfortunately, in actuality, it didn't work out that way. But more positives than negatives to come from that game, I'd say.
Yeah, and what's interesting is like the XG under Carrick has been pretty much the XG against has been pretty much under 0 for the all 3 games, and shows like how we've started to like sharpen up and tighten up more defensively, and you know starting to build on it. But Boro's XG against this season is been amazing. I think is it like 13 out of 20 games or something stuff like that where it's under 0, not sorry under 1, sorry. And I don't know how we've managed to lose those games, but
I think we're in the top 5 for XG against, which is good. In terms of that allowing the low quality chances against us.
But it's Boro, and we love to concede anyway. But we'll come to that goal in just a second, then. But Tom, I want to hear your thoughts on Boro's possession and chances, because 72% possession, probably the highest this season. We spoke a lot about possession as well, but how do you think that, one, how did Boro not win that game? And two, with all the possession that we had, has it started to improve a little bit more in terms of like how we're trying to play out from the back and maybe move into certain areas?
Yeah, well, I think the reason we didn't win that game is because we got absolutely football managered with the stats. You say that in about 5 games a season where you absolutely batter on a team and they'll win 1-0 or you'll draw 1-1 or something like that. But yeah, I mean, in terms of the possession style, I'm really enjoying watching it at the moment. There are times where we are playing it out from the back. Especially from goal kicks, like I've seen Hackney coming deep to get the ball and carry it into midfield, and it's a different style of play than what we've been used to under Wilder. A different style of possession, but it's possession with intent. We're always looking to do something with the ball. Where I can't say the same thing for the second half. Probably the last 2/3 of Wilders were in. To be honest, there was a lot of kind of aimless passing it around at the back. But now, what is good to see is we're keeping the ball, but the passes that we're playing, it's more intelligent. We're keeping hold of the ball, but getting it into attacking position so we can try and make something. And I think that was shown yesterday in the amount of chances that we had. Just as Dana said, Max O'Leary was absolutely on fire yesterday.
Just on the possession stuff, Tom, like obviously there was a selection of supporters that weren't happy with that type of style and say it was a bit too lackluster. We weren't playing with as much intent. What do you think they're trying to see in terms of the game? Because on one hand, possession is a great thing, but then second hand, possession doesn't always win your games, and it kind of proved yesterday. So, like, my question is, like, what do you think Boro have to do next in terms of they've gotten the possession and they play with a bit more attempt, but what can we do more of to try and turn those draws into wins?
I mean, if we can emulate what we did yesterday across, the majority of our games, then we're going to win more than we draw. I think we were unlucky yesterday to come up against such a. I don't even know if their keeper was in form, but he certainly is now. Like. Come up against that keeper on that day. But what's going to be really interesting for me is that first game after the World Cup, because I think it's such a unique season in that we've essentially got a mini pre-season right in the middle of it while the World Cup's going on. You got 4 weeks there for Carrick to kind of really instill his ideas into the squad and work with him, because I mean we are looking better now, but he's only worked with them for about a week and a half, and we've had 3 games in that time. So it's going to be game prep for 1 game. You might get a couple of training sessions in on certain styles and philosophies in that time, but you've always got to be looking ahead to the next game. If we can have a solid 4 weeks where he gets to work on the training ground with him, I expect is Luton our first game back? I think we're going to see a completely different Boro team to what we're used to. I think it's just going to be a much more polished version of what we've seen now.
Gives me a little bit of Aitor vibes. Remember, like under Crankawell, we'd have like a game, then a full week of training, and then another game, and we just felt like we were a lot more polished and more like not robotic in how we played, but it felt like we were a much better side than when we were playing 3 games in a week. So maybe we could see something similar to that. Obviously, that's way too early to tell. But I kind of agree with you, Tom. Like the things that he's implemented already has been quite impressive so far. But Dana, I want to talk about this Bristol City goal because of all the positives that we've probably seen in the game yesterday, there was just one moment for Bristol City, one big chance in the game, and they took it. And how did they get that chance, and how did they take that chance?
Yeah, it was frustrating, but they were always going to pose us a threat on the counter attack. They have some really good attacking players, you know, Vime and Semenyo, Tommy Conway, even Naki Wells has been good for them. So it was really disappointing to concede. The move starts as our throw in, and I'm not going to get triggered about this like I did for the Coventry goal. I don't think any goal could have triggered me as much as that one, or maybe the Watford one, because Muniz did have that shot on the halfway line. But this one's, you know, nothing's untoward here. It's just a standard throw in for Boro. But what happens is, I think because of the position of Howson and Hackney was the one that received the throw-in from Giles, and his body position is a certain way where I'm looking at that and I'm thinking, right, Tommy Smith has come infield from his right-back position because of the position of Johnny Howson, who's a little bit more advanced than his usual role. Tommy Smith's occupied effectively where Howson usually is in that deep midfield position. So you're probably looking at that third man there in Tommy Smith coming infield, and Hackney looks like he's wanting that ball to Tommy Smith, and then he's going to go and he wants to receive it back. So a bit of a 1-2 there, a little triangle around that Bristol City player who I think is Alex Scott. And this is fine. It's still fine in this position. But then what's not fine is the touch of Tommy Smith. It's just so poor, because I think him moving into that central midfield area is okay, because you can see why he's doing it. He's offering the ball. He wants to be brave. He wants to receive it, and he wants to get Boro moving. However, that touch is terrible. And Boro concede possession with all but Dale Fry and Darragh Lenihan behind the ball. Now, this does change because Jones and Howson are alerted to the danger, so they move back a little bit. But then the amount of space that's offered in behind is ridiculous. And then you look at Ryan Giles's position in conjunction to where Tommy Conway is, and basically this move shifts from left to right, back to left, and back to the right. And it's frustrating because all throughout that move, Ryan Giles is nowhere near Tommy Conway. And we spoke earlier about that's just the risk that you're going to have in the way that Boro play. But he doesn't get back quick enough, unfortunately, Giles. And yeah, throughout that move, Tommy Conway is in that space. And you'll see, because Boro have identified that the danger is on their left-hand side and our right-hand side, most of our players are moving into basically...
You move more compact shape because you're defending your goal, and then obviously someone has to come across to try and get into that area. So I'm assuming that's why we're looking to try and play in that compact shape.
Yeah, there's a word that I'm thinking of that's just fallen out of my ass, but they've basically gone towards
nice.
that space. Yeah, lovely, isn't it? But they're on that our right hand side, and it's what this does is, obviously you look at that space that both Semenyo and Tommy Conway have. Compromise was the word, compromise. But you look at the space that Tommy Conway and Antoine Semenyo have, there's a lot of space there. And you have to say it is an incisive and effective and very good counter-attack from Bristol City, but the way that it manifests itself is because of our mistake. But Giles is still well behind Tommy Conway when the ball's played to him and is about to be played back towards Andreas Weimann. And as I said, that's just the risk that you're going to have. I don't blame Giles for this, for not getting back in time, because he's very high up the pitch. And that's where you want Giles to be. You know, he's a wing back. He's got a good delivery 9 times out of 10, although we didn't really see it yesterday. But you want him in those areas of the pitch, those high areas. So you're gonna have that drawback there, that potential negative. And we did see it yesterday. But it's really Tommy Smith's bad pass. I think sometimes you could say that's a fantastic counter-attack. Fair enough. The players, I don't know, press. They've triggered a press. They've won the ball back. It's fantastic, gaining possession and countering. But that's just Boro giving Bristol City the ball back, which is incredibly poor, but also something that I'm hopeful will be ironed out of our game. But to be fair to them, it's a fantastic counter-attack. It's just really disappointing the way that it comes about. But hey, we are actually joint in terms of conceded counter-attacks this season, the joint most we've conceded. Only 3, but still, I feel like that will grow, and I'm surprised it's not actually that. I'm surprised it's not more, just because I think we've seen a few times us being careless in possession, and that was another example of it, unfortunately.
Just on that, then we talk about, like, when we talk about phases of play in terms of, like, when when a goal happens, it's normally the stake 3. We're in that first phase out of the 3 before someone goes to score. Just on the first graphic that you showed up, there's a part of where Hayden Hackney, sorry, I remember the second one where Hayden Hackney receives the ball, and for me, if Hayden Hackney looks to his right hand side and sees Darrell Lenihan, this move or this counter attack doesn't probably happen. I think when we do get the ball, it comes back to Lenihan. Lenihan's got 2 options there, which is a more higher percentage in terms of getting reduced on the counter attack. So if he comes back to Lenihan here, he's got to open his body up. He's probably got Fry on that more central play of the pitch, and then also he's got Steffen even more. So sometimes when you're recycling that, you are probably reducing the risk of anything that probably happened to it. And now you might get a groan from a fan and say, "Oh, why are we playing backwards?" and stuff like that. But for me, I think that ball to Smith, although it's shown that Boro trying to play with intent and trying to get forward, and it's much more positive way of playing, I don't think he needs to play that ball. I think he's looking at Tommy Smith there, and Smith's already getting pressed here. And I know it's like a very soft press, and it's not really. I think it's very easy because the opposition players run in a different direction. But for me, Smith, I just think the way his body's going to be placed here, I don't think that's the right ball, to be honest. And I think where Smith's going to play, his only ball that Smith can play there is to Ryan Giles, and Giles has already got Semenyo on him. So for me, I think Boro have to look at maybe that decision making, and maybe he's being a bit too picky. But I think that ball to Lennon.
See, I don't mind that. I don't mind that, because I remember a game we played earlier this season where we were so safe in the way that we were playing, too safe. We weren't being brave on the ball. I appreciate that move there. It's just it's the touch. I don't necessarily think that the only player there that Tommy Smith can pass to is Giles, because you saw Hayden Hackney's body position. He actually does make that run forward, which we see Hayden Hackney do. He's very good at receiving it, giving it, and then going. He has the pass is to who am I talking about? Someone muted me, so I'm lost now. Who muted me? To
it was Hackney. Yeah, Hackney.
There we go.
Sorry, it was me.
So,
accident.
You absolutely threw me there, Johnny. But yeah, I think I don't mind that, because I think that's Boro being brave in possession. It's just unfortunate in that moment. It's just a really, really bad and heavy touch from Tommy Smith.
Yeah, I mean,
can I mute you now?
You can mute me, yeah, because I heard like an echo on my headphone. I thought I'll just mute myself to get rid of the echo. But I think that's on the Smith stuff. Like, even when you look at the second pass and the third pass from that, it's only Giles on, and then you're gonna have to create your shape again. Well, not shape, but you're gonna have to rotate again to try and find that next pass. So that next pass was probably going to be to Fry, but I mean, you could go on it for ages. It's like it's happened and you can't transition it. But I mean, for the positivity side, I agree. The fact that we're trying to recycle in that half space, in that area, I think it's still really positive, and we should look to continue to do that, even if we are trying to play too safe. But speaking of Hayden Hackney and Dana, before I muted you, he's played more games now. He started to really find the groove of Championship football. How do you think he's looking now?
I think he's looking good, and he looks comfortable. That's the biggest compliment that I could give him. He looked comfortable when he made his debut for Boro in the Brentford Cup game in lockdown season, and he's looked comfortable in pretty much every game I've seen of him, and that's the biggest compliment that I could give him. Carrick said he looks like he's been playing there for 10 years, and I completely agree. He's very good at, like I said, receiving the ball under pressure. Looking at a few of his Y Scout clips, there's a lot of moments labelled under pressure pass, and I think that's the good of Hayden Hackney, and I'm not surprised that Carrick does like him. He's the one that will receive, as Tom mentioned, from goal kicks, and he'll be able to play on the half turn and quicken the tempo a little bit with Howson pushed up. But in that game yesterday, he had the third most touches in the game with 105, 91 total passes, 85 accurate, the best passing accuracy in the Boro 11. And even in the whole game, only Tommy Conway had a 100% passing accuracy, but he only made 9 passes, so we're just going to discount him there. But 100% dribble success from 3 dribbles. The 3 dribbles were the second most from both sides in that game. 100% tackle success from 3 tackles, the second most from both sides. And 2 key passes as well. Jones was the highest on 5. So I thought he had a brilliant game, passed the eye test, really well reflected in the stats as well. And congrats to him as well, because Scotland under 21 call up, absolutely brilliant for him.
It is. It's a really good achievement, especially after only a few games as well. And taking that step into international football, it'd be great to see how he's going to develop over the next few games in the second half of the season if he gets the opportunity to play. But I want to talk about this a moment in the game, Tom, around where Boro probably could have won it, or we're looking more on top. Force was getting them behind, and then he was subbed off for Crooks. How do you think that sub impacted the game? Because it felt like the game changed quite significantly.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not against that sub being made because I think you sent out a group chat yesterday. Force was obviously getting them behind, like you said, and pulling a lot of the players out of position. So there was a lot more space for Akpom. However, I'm very well aware that he sprints absolutely everywhere. So I think around the 70-minute mark, must be getting tired around that point. So I'm not against, subbing Force off on 70 minutes because he was an absolute workforce yesterday in the game. I was waiting for someone to get that there.
Only just got. I was like, "Isn't it workhorse?"
It got. I was still. Do you know when you think? I was like, wait. He said a pun then. I was like, oh, wait, how's that work?
Well done, Tom. Well done.
Thank you. I mean, it took me a while to get that one, and I said it. So, yeah. So where was it? I'd have taken him off for one of the other striker options, to be honest. And I think out of the 2 of them, I'd have maybe went with Matthew Hoppy, just because we know kind of his game is kind of chasing people down, pressing a lot. That's where one of his strengths is. So I feel like that would have been a very like for like change, Hoppy for Force. Crooks coming on, I do feel like it stopped our attacking momentum a little bit. I think it kind of slowed things down. I'm not entirely sure what the plan was from that. I'm not even saying Crooks came on and he was terrible or anything like that, but I don't know. It was just it was such a different change from what was working in the game, and I don't think that paid off.
You've got to get balls into the box sorry, Johnny, I know I've interrupted you about 5 times today, but you've got to get crosses at the box for Crooks, and we kept hitting the first man, and that was the theme of the game. It was just ball at the box, hit the first man, or Tim Closer heads it away. You've got to get those balls into the box for Crooks, and we just didn't really do that.
I was going to say the exact same thing, really, and then also the sub for Crooks. It kind of felt that Boro weren't trying to play into a striker. They were trying to get the ball out wide and play through. But when Crooks came on, he had more of that central space, and Akpom was finding a lot of his joy in those key areas of the pitch. Just outside the penalty box and trying to be the most effective part of the pitch. And when Crooks came on, it felt like they just isolated each other, and it was like, I don't know why we went with that. Maybe he was trying to hold the ball up before Akpom to get in. I just don't understand it. But I mean, it was a sub that I thought it just wasn't the right sub for Crooks to come in. If Crooks was to come on, then maybe Akpom might have been the shout, or maybe like a Howson or something like that, and just see how the game was going to develop from that. But might not have been the right sub in our opinion, but we'll have to see why Carrick made it. But in terms of Carrick, Tom, because he's had 3 games now, 1 win, 1 draw, 1 defeat. We are learning more and more about Michael Carrick's Middlesbrough and how it's going to change over like probably the rest of the season. You know what we'll see now, and maybe in the new year, completely different probably. But what do you think's different to the previous regime, Tom? What can you see?
Well, I think we've covered it already, the narrow shape. I think that's working pretty well for us from a defensive standpoint. I feel like Carrick's probably came in, identified an area where we were conceding goals from, and kind of addressed that. Unfortunately, we did recruit for a back three, so it does seem like that's maybe been ripped up a little bit, but I also do think that the four's working. And that narrow formation, I think, does suit us. And I just think, as I said earlier, possession with intent. There was so many. I mean, it even goes back to last January when we all went to Blackburn away and got there like 5 minutes after kickoff because we couldn't find a parking space. But yeah, I mean, I feel like that's where it started, the possession without actually doing much of it under Wilder. There was a lot in that game of just aimless crossing passing across the back three. And it was a bit of a pattern that continued, and I don't feel like we're doing that anymore. I feel like when we get possession now, we're looking forwards, or you give it to someone like Hackney, who's good at carrying the ball and can beat a man in centre midfield to create space and give it to someone else. I think that clip that we posted that went viral about Carrick, teaching basic stuff to open up the pitch to our midfielders. I feel like that's working pretty well. And there was something I spotted yesterday from where I was sat in the box behind the bench. There were multiple times in the first half where like Johnny Howson was coming over to speak to Carrick. Carrick was giving him instructions, and you could just see it in Howson's face, like he was just like understanding, and then he'd go and like take that to everyone else. I feel like with Wilder, because I've seen it from the same seat a few times, he was kind of very much more shouty, and I don't feel like players were taking on board what he was saying as those instructions, but I really like the way that Carrick kind of coaches them through it. I feel like identify mistakes and then coach that out of people. It's a great way to manage, and I feel like the initial 3 games you can see progress where he is doing that.
Dan, is there anything to add from that?
I think he wants us to play out from the back more. I think that's what he's encouraging. And you'll see when Zack Steffen, because Zack Steffen is a very good goalkeeper in terms of playing out from the back and pinging those balls over to the wide areas. But also, because we've got Hackney in the team, who is a ball carrier now and will take it on the half turn and is comfortable receiving under pressure, you will see us play that way and play out from the back a little bit more. I think we're seeing the defenders probably play out as well. Against Hull, you saw Lenihan with that very low ball across the floor to the feet of the strikers. And our build-ups are different as well, I think, in terms of, obviously, Jones isn't getting into those spaces that I want him to. He needs to work on his crossing, obviously, but I think the build-up from the back and actually transitioning the player from defence to attack, we saw it yesterday. It was very slick and it was very seamless. And when we move the ball quickly, we look very dangerous. And yeah, the narrow shape, in and out possession, the flexibility. Carrick has said that he doesn't really have a set system, so it'll be interesting to see that going forward. And also, just a little quirk that I've noticed, we want to play straight from the off. So a lot of the time what you'll see under Wilder and under Warnock, we'll boot the ball long from kickoff. I noticed against Preston second half, played it along the floor. We want to play straight away. We want to play immediately. So there's little things that I'm picking up on that I'm quite liking so far. So you can see, as I said, the foundation's being put in place to get this team playing the way that Carrick wants to.
Yeah, I've never understood that really, because of like when you play it back, to hit it long into like a into a channel or like across the pitch, and yeah, it does get you up the pitch, but 9 times out of 10 you lose the ball. So it's just like, well, that was kind of pointless, wasn't it? But with that, it's really good. I think just the one big change I've seen is I think Boro have become a really good counter pressing team, to be honest. Like I was saying a little bit earlier, a lot of our chances now are coming from a counter press because a team just doesn't know how to manage it. I think as soon as you get that instinct of a slower pass or something that's maybe a little bit misplaced, we're on them like really, really quickly, and we're able to generate the space that we need to get in behind. I think there was a chance in the first half yesterday where we counter pressed really well, won the ball, and on the transition from Hackney, played it through to McGree, and McGree should have probably scored, but he didn't. But I think that there, and I was obviously the Preston one as well, won it in a key area of the pitch on that right hand side, switch of play up again. McGree probably should have took it on and had a shot. Maybe Riley McGree's the problem here, but just the. But I was saying, like, that counter press and transition is really, really good. And although we're becoming more possession based, it's nice to have that counter press within it, and it's definitely within that shape that we're seeing. But let's move on. Let's move on to questions, because every week you send us your questions via Twitter, email theborebreakdown@hotmail.com, or by our Telegram chat, and that you can join it. Over 300 Boro fans talking absolutely anything but Boro. And there's loads of different channels in there. There's a gaming chat now, there's a Football League one, there's Premier League, and just away day tickets. There's so much for you to join the community, because it's a really fun one. But the first question we've got is from Flo. It says, hey guys, for which position do you see the biggest need to bring in new players during the transfer window in the winter? Do you think 1 to 2 players could be the missing pieces for a 4-4-2 to fully click? Tom, do you want to take this one?
If he unmutes his mic,
if you unmute yourself, Tom.
It was in full swing then.
Did not even realise that. Oh, I need to go back.
It's like a Zoom call today. It's like a Zoom call.
I feel like we might need a few in January. I'd like to see a backup right back brought in, because I feel like if we were to lose Sammy Smith, we wouldn't really have too much cover in that area. So that might make things a bit difficult for us. But other than that, I think the midfield is where we need to be looking. I think another centre midfielder and kind of a number 10 or a winger to bring in. Obviously, it's going to be difficult during January to kind of get quality players in those positions. No club's going to be wanting to lose a first choice player halfway through the season. But I feel like those are areas that we need to address, and I don't think we're too far off making this system work. I do think, even though we've recruited for the 3-5-2, the players that we've brought in, they can fit into the system that we've switched to. It's just we were light in midfield anyway, and I think now that we've moved to full backs again, we're light at full back, a right back. So I think those are the areas that need to address to make it work.
Okay, then, and just as you're on about fullbacks and wingers, the next question feeds quite nicely to that, because Rob said, with our wingers proving being ineffective, is there any other formation we should be looking to use? Dana, is there anything else?
I think you could probably play 4-2-3-1 with more inverted forwards, I suppose. Maybe, like a Watmore, for example. But then who plays on the other side? It's difficult, isn't it? Because as Tom said, we did recruit for a 3 at the back, so there's a few problems there, but I wouldn't change it. I know that the wing backs are, I wouldn't say being ineffective, I'd say not as effective, but they're still getting on the ball, they're still influencing play. They just need to refine a few little bits of their game, which I think is, for me, no reason to change. But to answer the question, maybe a 4-2-3-1. I know that's kind of what we play anyway, in some situations when we have the ball, but maybe with Watmore, for example, because Watmore's not going to come in and cross the ball, is he? He's going to want to run into those channel areas, and he's going to want to try to shoot himself or cause problems through his dribbling. So I think Watmore's suddenly, for me anyway, quite a key player in terms of that flexibility. So it's just about copying Watmore, I suppose, or getting somebody similar.
Okay, then. Next question. Tom, I'm coming to you, so be ready. Where does Crooks fit now into this side? Is the centre forward where he fits in? So what do you think about that? Where does Crooks fit into this side now?
I really don't want to see Crooks at centre forward. I think it has. I think it has to be centre mid, but there's no reason to change the centre mid pairing that we have at the moment. Hackney's there on merit, and I think Howson has adapted to the new system well, and he's doing well in that system as well as being the less less advanced centre midfielder, and let Hackney be the legs and carry the ball a lot. So yeah, I think Crooks needs to earn his way back in, and I want to see that in centre midfield. I don't want to see Crooks playing as a striker, because we've got other strikers that, Muniz wins headers every time he plays. So for what we'd probably want from Crooks as a striker, I think Muniz would do it better. And then we've got depth in striker anyway. So I don't think that's a position where we need to repurpose Crooks into playing.
Just to add to that as well, it might be a very strange one, but if we were to move into a 4-2-3-1 or similar to what we're playing, Crooks in for Jones, right, on the right-hand side, but you play over more of a wider winger. So you would maybe take out McGree and put in the Giles and put Bowler in as a left-back, or Matt Clark, because Matt Clark can play there as well. But you play with a wider winger, and it was very similar to when Stuani plays on that right-hand side of a 4-2-3-1. Get him in at the back post, because you're knocking that long ball across, and Crooks will be in the back post for the header and trying to get in from there. And that could be a nice little tactical play from Boro if they were to do that. Or maybe head the ball back in for maybe a force who likes to play in around the 6-yard box. And I think that could be quite a nice angle for Boro to do. So maybe that. Then the final question is from Jazzy. Says, how has Carrick's start compared to our expectations of him? Good, bad? Good in a way we didn't expect, bad in a way we didn't predict. Tom, I'll keep with you. How has Carrick's start compared to our expectations of him?
Well, I didn't have any expectations personally. I didn't know what to expect from Michael Carrick. So for me, I'm feeling quite good about the start. Obviously, I'd have really wished that we hadn't lost to Preston, as that was just a waste of a long journey for me. But yeah, I mean, we looked good in that game anyway, and I feel like we've just built on that since. The whole game. Hull was terrible, and we absolutely deserved to win that game the way we did, and then we should have won yesterday as well. I think like I said earlier, what he's been able to do in a week and a half in terms of changing the style and making us a little bit better in possession, intent-wise. I think that's probably exceeded what I thought was possible with him coming in such a short space of time. So just looking forward to seeing where we go from here now.
Dan, is there anything else to add to that, or do you want to move on?
No, I'd agree with Tom. I didn't really have any expectations, but I suppose even with that, I have been pleasantly surprised at just how quickly he's been able to implement certain things, and that's only a good thing going forward. So yeah, that's pretty much all I would add. I'd probably echo it and then add that little bit at the end.
Okay then. Well, let's move on to the praise and place then, because the praise and place is the place we like to give praise to a fan, a person at the club, a player, a chips and gravy, a pizza shop, anything you want, or even Kieran Scott's fashion designer for this wonderful tie that me and Dana are both wearing. So praise and place, who gets your place this week? Dana, who are you going to give it to?
I've got two players in mind for this one. Firstly is Riley McGree, because he had a really difficult evening against Hull. Nothing came off for him. You could have probably played the Benny Hill theme tune over his game, because just nothing was sticking for him, unfortunately. But he was very good against Bristol City. He was occupying the exact spaces that I think Michael Carrick would want him to, and influencing the game because of that. He was pulling players out of their position, opening up space elsewhere, and he was very, very unlucky not to score. He had the most shots of any player in the Championship this game week, although his XG wasn't particularly high, but still, Max O'Leary made some fantastic saves against him, and I think he was unfortunate not to get a goal yesterday, Riley McGree, but he did set up that equaliser from Chuba Akpom. So I thought Riley McGree was brilliant. He's come under a lot of criticism, so I think it's only right that we do give him some praise as well. And then Zack Steffen as well, because he was outside the Riverside, outside the North Stand before the game, donating 2 Middlesbrough food banks. So I thought, he's a brilliant player to have at the club, Zack Steffen, because in terms of those key societal issues, he does put his voice out there, and I absolutely love that. So it was brilliant to see him getting involved, and he gave it a good little up the Boro at the end of that video. So big fan of that. So both of those in the praise place this week.
Okay, Ryan McGree and Zack Steffen. I've got to mention that it is the Zack Steffen praise and place now.
You did, yeah. I was waiting for that mention as well.
It's all right. I'll find a way to squeeze it in. But Tom, who gets your nominations this week?
I was going to say Akpom and Hackney, but I definitely echo what Dan has just said there about McGree. I thought he was excellent yesterday. He had a chance in the first half. Hell of a turn. Someone gave him the ball, and he just pretty much turned on the spot and took one of the Bristol players out of the game. I didn't see him fall over, but
yeah, I didn't say that well as all, did I?
I mean, he should have scored off that as well. It was a great save from their keeper. Unfortunately,
it's a good joke when you're laughing at your own one, Tom.
I always laugh at my own joke. Someone has to, but Hackney I think has come on really strong since he's came into the team. I think it was only a few pods ago we were talking about his debut, and I was like, he just didn't stand out. He looked comfortable, but he just kind of looked like standard Championship player, which isn't even a bad thing to say. I think it's like the whole Eddie Hearn saying Jake Paul's an average boxer thing. Like, yeah, you're not bad by any means. It's just like he didn't stand out as being good. But then the last few games, I think he's really, really progressed well in that position. I think you can see he's picking up in confidence, and with the Michael Carrick quote that we said earlier, like it looks like he's played there for 10 years. I'd absolutely agree with that. I think there's no way you can take him out of the team at the moment, and I think for a young lad who's coming into the first team for the first time, that's he's playing absolutely fantastically now, and to become such an integral part of the system that we're playing. And then Akpom, I think we said it all in what we said about the whole game, but yeah, fantastic at the moment. I'm really enjoying seeing him play at the moment. You can tell he's really enjoying playing at the moment, and loving the redemption arc. It's just got me thinking now, how many goals is he going to end up on this season? I hope I've not jinxed him, touch wood. But he's doing great at the moment. And I can't remember which game it was. A few games back where he missed from inside the 6-yard box. I think the keeper did really well to get a hand to it. I feel like a couple of years ago. Like I said, them COVID seasons have blended into one, so it could have been a couple of years ago. It could have been last year for all I know. But when there was no fans there, I feel like that's the type of thing that might have got into Akpom's head, and he maybe would have let it affect his confidence a little bit, and then he's came straight on from doing that and scoring more goals. So I feel like he's mentally stronger now from where he was a couple of seasons ago, and I think that's probably only been helped by the fact that he's had two managers this season who really seem to have rated him. I mean, for all the problems we had with Chris Wilder at the end of his reign, he did give a lot of credit to Akpom for coming in from the cold in pre-season and making an impact, and then he's undroppable under Carrick.
Okay, then. And just to conclude the Zack Steffen praise and place, I'm going to go for Hayden Hackney, I think, for my nomination. You've both alluded to, I think he's been excellent the last couple of games. Really mature performances, really good on the turn, and just progressing Boro forwards. And I think that's what we've needed for the last few weeks. And it's nice to see an academy player come in and really hit the ground running and start to become an integral part and a big player in the system. So it's really good to see that, and he's thoroughly deserving of the Praise and Place nomination this week. So that concludes Zack, Steffen Praise and Place. But just before we move on to Blackpool, I just want to quickly chat about Play Brew, because on Thursday there is a football quiz on there. We're going. I'm not going to be wearing this Pelican tie, but it's a really good night. And it's
flamingo.
A flamingo. It's the same thing. It is the same thing. That is a pelican. It is.
Pelican.
It is. It's the same thing.
At least it's a bird, I suppose.
It's a bird. A bird is a bird. Pigeon, pelican, flamingo, they're all the same. You know what I mean? A bird's a bird. It's got a beak on it. So,
dinosaurs have beaks.
I
don't know what has anything to do anything, but...
Okay,
they're not birds.
Whatever. Right, anyway, Play Brew. So on that, the base in Cannon Park, and also they do some really good beers and quizzes, and we're going to be going, and it's a really good time. And you could definitely get yourselves down there on Thursday night. So the big football quiz at Play Brew, and we are going to be there and going to be helping out, and also come over and join us and have a couple of pints and Dana's paying apparently. So if you just come up to us and say, Dana, can I have a pint? Dana will buy you
said
one.
Dana's pay, and I was like, well, yeah, we'll be paid if I'm paying for everyone's drinks.
Well, you are now. You are now. But let's move on to Blackpool because Boro make the trip to Bloomfield Road, where Blackpool are 18th in the championship table. Michael Appleton is in his second spell there. Unfortunately, we didn't get anyone this week to help us out, so we'll break it down ourselves. But they're currently setting up in a 4-3-3 formation. They are plagued by injuries, 14 doubts for Boro's trip midweek, and 14 times this season Blackpool have actually had less than 50% possession, and so it does show that they're a counter-attacking team, and they'll try and do this through the wingers and try and get a lot of play out wide and play over a lot of width. So when we are looking at Boro's shape and looking at Blackpool and how they might affect us, I can really see this from the goal kick and how they'll look to play. So you look at their number 9 or Gary Medine or whoever will play that number 9 system, and they'll look to play on each side, whoever the goalkeeper wants to direct the play. And how they'll get up the pitch is they'll look to use that numerical advantage and maybe counter-attack on like the 2 or 3 players. Where Boro's average position is what we spoke about a little bit earlier, where we are trying to play that 4-4-2, but a very narrow 4-4-2 within our 4-2-3-1 with Akpom coming in and creating more of like a shield around their number 4. So when the ball does come into him, that's where the Boro's really excessive and aggressive press does come into play, and Boro will look to counter press and attack from those, and that's where I think Boro will have most of their joy. But what Blackpool will try and do is they'll try and get into these wide positions, so they'll look to utilise Giles and Smith when they push up. You'll see their wingers trying to stick with them, but then also when they do try and counter attack, you'll see maybe the left back, the 8 and the winger to really try and push on and try and get him behind. So I think the wingers and also those wide areas are going to be where Blackpool will try and get the best out of Boro in the middle of the week. But in terms of their players to watch, Jerry Yates and CJ Hamilton have been very, very good this season. Jerry Yates is their top scorer, of course, and he's absolutely banging them in. And he's going to come in from that left-hand side and it'll cause Boro a lot of problems. So just a couple of players to watch. But in terms of predictions, guys, Michael Appleton, he's had a difficult start in his return. I mean, he was always going to be difficult with Neil Critchley having a really good season last year with them. But how do you see Boro doing in midweek? Can you see another Watmore last-minute equaliser and absolute limbs everywhere? And Neil Madison chatting about Joel Pasquale and all that kind of fun stuff. But Dana, what do you think? What's the predictions?
I'm going to go 2-1 Boro. I'm hoping there's some last-minute limbs, but I'll settle for a 2-1, however it comes. Okay,
2-1. Tom, what are you going to go for?
Let's go 2 weeks running 3-0. I hope there's no need for last-minute limbs. I hope just absolutely batter them. I think, the game yesterday, if like I say, if we can replicate that in further games, we're going to win more than we lose and create that amount of chances. I think 3-0 is entirely possible.
Okay, then. Hopefully no one spouted the drink this week and they were more optimistic with that one, Tom. I'm going to go for a win as well. I think we'll win. Tom, you know what? I'm going to join you. 3-0 Boro. There we go. Well, let's do this and put a pound on it as well. Or maybe do a Davy meltdown and put 3-1 Boro and hope for the best. But guys, that's it. Thank you very much for joining me, and to listeners and viewers, thank you very much for listening to us on your podcast provider or watching us on YouTube. But 4 points from the week for Boro, 5 goals and 8 for Chuba. All aboard the Chuba train. Up the Boro breakdown.